All right. I think we have a few more people joining us. Welcome everybody to our Connectedness community chat. I think we're going to wait another moment or two to allow others to join. Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad you're here. And today we will be talking about the Connectedness chapter of Thrive 2050, the Montgomery County General Plan update. My name is Suzanne Paul. I'm a planner at the Parks Department, and my co-presenter today is Kendra Heisen from the Planning Department. I think, Kendra, everyone should be able to see our faces.
Yeah, I just waved, so I could identify myself virtually.
Awesome, thank you. Our moderator today is Marin Hill from the Planning Department. Marin can wave. We also have a few other staff members from our equity working group, Lauren Stam, Tamika Graham, Juan Castro, and Pamela Zorich, and they may be participating in the conversation at various points. And hopefully you can see all of our faces. And if you feel comfortable, we'd love to see your face too. We're, learning how to do these community outreach events over Zoom and trying to make it as personable as possible. So our goal for today's meeting is to have an informal discussion about the Connectedness chapter of the general plan, to hear ideas from you all, and to answer any questions that you might have for us. This call is being translated into Spanish, so I'm trying to be mindful of speaking a little more slowly. During this call, we will share a short set of slides to explain our ideas, and then we want to hear from you all about any thoughts, questions, or concerns that you have. What's missing? Are we capturing this idea? We've prepared several prompting questions, but we want this to be an informal and conversational time, so please speak up at any point. Next slide, please. Great. So how to participate. Here are a few tips and reminders about the call today and participating via Zoom. So this call is being recorded and will be shared with the public for anyone who is unable to attend, and so that staff can review and incorporate your questions and comments as we continue to evolve the general plan. There are several ways to participate today. One is via the Zoom chat, and to open the meeting chat, click the chat symbol at the bottom of the screen and type into the chat box that pops up. You can also raise and lower your hand when you want to ask a question or make a comment out loud. Mute and unmute are also located on the bottom of your screen. And we just ask that everyone keeps themselves muted until called on. If you are calling in from the phone, let's see, I wrote this down. *6 is unmute, and *9 is raise your hand. So Marin and Tamika will keep an eye on raised hands and questions in the chat. We are new to presenting on Zoom like this, so bear with us. If you are having any issue, let us know and we'll do our best to get it addressed. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So these are uniquely stressful times. We are navigating new and difficult challenges presented by a global pandemic. There is national outcry against police brutality and systemic racial oppression, and there's a presidential election looming. The Equity Working Group talks a lot about the importance of checking in with each other, about how we're feeling at the start of meetings, and creating a welcoming and non-judgmental space for brave conversations. So we wanted to start out today to hear from you all about how you are doing. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen that asks you how you're doing today, with 5 options relating to these gifts or images above. We'll just take a moment to see how that is. Looks like people are so far doing okay, which is great.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that, that it seems
Yeah.
like everyone's in a solid mood, which
Fired up,
is great.
also great and understandable.
And hopeful. That's nice as well.
Hopeful, yep, that's great. I think some days I'm a combination of all these things. Wonderful. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay. So the next slide that we're going to look at is what is connectedness. So we're here today to talk about the general plan and to talk about this idea of connectedness. And we wanted to take a moment to talk about what we mean by connectedness before diving into the goals of the plan. So Montgomery County is a diverse and dynamic county. The planning department produces a trends report, and that report states that since 1990, Montgomery County has grown in population, is getting older, is becoming more diverse, speaks a variety of languages, and has the highest concentration of foreign-born residents in the DC region. So thinking about these trends and the future of Montgomery County prompted us to make a whole chapter in the general plan about connectedness. And when we talk about connectedness in Thrive 2050, what we're talking about is the idea of a sense of belonging and an atmosphere of acceptance, communities that feel safe and inclusive, trust in government and trust in each other, equitable access to parks, public spaces, services, and technology. And Kendra is going to go into more detail about kind of unpacking this idea of connectedness and what the goals are that we've written up. So some of these ideas are more intangible than others, but we believe they are critical to the continued success of the county, and that it's important to think critically about the role of land use planning and the role that these policies play in connecting or disconnecting residents. Okay, next slide, please. So just a little background for anyone that's new today or newer to the general plan. Thrive 2050 is the update to the county general plan. And the plan was last comprehensively updated in 1969. The general plan establishes a long-range vision for the future of growth in the county. I think our planning director always talks about being prepared for change. So the general plan will help guide countywide policies, future initiatives, land use planning infrastructure, community amenities, and private development, among other things. Next slide, please. The vision for Thrive 2050 is that in 2050, Montgomery County is a web of complete communities connected by vibrant corridors. And this vision is supported by 3 pillars of the plan: equity, environment, and economy. So complete communities are individual and unique centers of neighborhood activity and urban nodes that optimize land use with a variety of housing types and price points, located close to transit, workplaces, needed goods and services, public amenities, and a network of active park spaces. Vibrant corridors are envisioned as comfortable, safe corridors of multimodal transportation and services, and corridors also of green parks, stream valleys, and trails. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the 8 chapters in the plan. Today we're talking about connectedness, but you can see that the other chapters include complete communities, diverse economy, safe and efficient travel, affordability and attainability, healthy and sustainable environment, diverse and adaptable growth, and design, arts, and culture. And then, the project timeline. So this is where we are in the general plan process. You can see we're about halfway through. There will be more opportunities to provide feedback as the plan continues. And at the end of this presentation, we will share a list of upcoming community chats. But so let's see, last Thursday, the draft policies and actions went in front of the planning board. And then anyone who is interested can go back to our Montgomery Planning Board website and go into the archives, and they should be able to watch that discussion. And then upcoming this fall, the working draft of the plan will take place, and then the idea is to have the planning board review it this fall and winter with transmittal to the county council in the spring. And then, unless anyone has other things to add, I will turn it over to Kendra to talk in more detail about connectedness.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kendra Heisen, and as Suzanne mentioned, I'm a member of the Equity Working Group working on this particular chapter of the general plan on connectedness. And as you all may be experiencing, like most of us, we're having a connectedness problem. I think now more than ever, it's been exacerbated and highlighted, especially with the social distancing and quarantine and isolation that we've all been experiencing. But as the world opens back up and things hopefully get back to normal, we can begin to really address some of the problems that were happening prior to this, pandemic. And we realized through our analysis and like looking at the trends report that humans crave social interaction, and it adds to quality of life, and it adds to the sense of vibrancy of communities and places, and we want to facilitate that. And currently we kind of have a connectedness problem in the county. Looking across the county, we have issues of traffic where lots of people are isolated in their cars and just moving at the same time, but not really connected to one another. And also no one likes to sit in traffic, right? We're kind of working from home in isolation. Many of our communities may or may not have the amenities or access to certain resources that they need or deserve. And so we want to make sure that we, get those things to people. Obviously, we have some issues with major roads that are pretty hard to cross that keep us disconnected. And sometimes technology can, even though it's a tool to connect us, it can keep us disconnected. And then just generally public spaces and general sense of loneliness as we age and as things move forward in life. And so we realize that it's really key to stay connected, both socially, emotionally, physically, all those things, because it adds to the vibrancy of our communities. And so I'm just going to walk everyone through the particular goals and policies we came up with for this particular chapter of the plan. And so if you need me to slow down, I naturally talk pretty fast. So just let me know, and I'm happy to slow it down a little bit. But so what are the goals for connectedness? So there, we created this graphic that kind of highlights we have 5 major goals for connectedness. And as you can see, they're all connected, right? They all work together in order to create this complete vision for connectedness. Our first goal is to connect people to people. We realize that we want to create strong neighborhoods and communities that foster communication and interaction among residents and create a culture of inclusion. We want everyone to feel a part of the county. We want everyone to feel like their voice should be heard. And we want everyone to have opportunity to, be with their families and meet new people and really experience the full wealth of diversity that our county has to offer. And so some of the policies that have come out of this particular goal are the use of public space for people to connect. We see public space as a really great opportunity to bring people together, to socialize, as well as to experience different things and share resources and amenities. The use of parks to connect people. If I could be quoting this wrong, and parks, please correct me, but I think we have something like 400 plus parks in our network in Montgomery County, and we just want to make sure all of those places are quality and people can connect to them or get to them efficiently and safely. And then the third policy in this particular goal is design spaces for social gathering. So there are a lot of spaces where we informally gather, but why can't we use those spaces to actually formally gather? You know, when you think about when you're picking your kids up from school, or you're thinking about going to the rec center, or you're thinking about, you know, the little pocket park around the corner from your house. Those are places where people can socially gather. And if we design them in such a way that allows for everyone to use the space, as they see fit, and share the spaces with others, we feel like we could create really vibrant communities that way. So goal 2 is to connect people to government. We want you all to get connected with us. You know, a lot of times there is a disconnect between what the community wants and is expressing and what we are putting forward. Hence why we're here today, so you guys can tell us what we might be missing and where we're lacking connectivity. So we want to connect people to government, build civic capacity within communities, and make government planning and decision-making processes accessible, transparent, and easy for everyone to participate in and understand. So for us, some of the policies that we developed for this particular goal include foster trust with the community leaders. We understand that historic planning practices have maybe disconnected us in some ways, and made people distrustful of the work that we're doing. But we want everyone to know that we are doing our best to create the most vibrant and best communities for Montgomery County. And the best way to do that is for us to connect further with community members and leaders and people who are the experts of their own neighborhoods, so that they can tell us, those of us who are experts in this kind of large scale planning, what we may or may not be achieving. And just building general relationships, you know, like we're people too. And so we have the same desires and needs that others have. And we want to make sure that we can communicate that together. We want to remove barriers to community engagement, meaning we have so many different populations in Montgomery County. Lots of people speak different languages. Lots of people have different needs or abilities. And we want to make sure that we are removing all those barriers so that everyone can participate in the process. Because that's very important to have the totality of the county represented. And I think I put remove barriers to community engagement twice. And so please ignore that third bullet, because there's clearly only 2 policies. No
But
worries
we
here.
really mean that one.
Yeah, we are adamant. We want to get rid of these barriers because we realize they cause a lot of headaches for all of us. So policy goal 3 is connecting people to services. And so for us, we want to improve access to neighborhood-based services such as housing, jobs, professional and government services, workforce training, educational opportunities, and of course parks and open spaces on a county-wide and regional level. We want to focus on county residents with the greatest socioeconomic needs, and for those who are geographically isolated from our services. So our main goal, our main policy for this particular goal is to distribute services throughout the county in an equitable way, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, make sure that everyone has what they need to thrive, right? So that's kind of our goal 3. Goal 4 is we want to leverage technology to connect, right? We realize that technology is a really awesome tool, and we want to use technology in innovative ways to increase community connectedness and resiliency for all residents. And we do understand that technology does pose some challenges, especially for those who may be less technically inclined, for people who might not have access. And so we try to curate our policies around those kind of ideologies. So policy number 1 for this goal is to connect areas with limited access. We realize that everyone may not have Wi-Fi, everyone may not have that as an amenity, and it's really necessary in this day and age. Policy number 2 is to serve typically disconnected groups. We realize that sometimes seniors and young people may feel disconnected through either not having access or just not knowing how to use the technology. And so we want to serve those groups as well and figure out how we can make technology work for us the best possible way. And then equitable implementation, equitably implement emerging technologies. Okay, so I was messing up that sentence a little bit. So as you know, technology moves pretty rapidly, and because of that rapid change, it's really hard to keep up all the time with the physical things that need to be implemented for technology to work. And so we're going to work really hard to make sure we implement the physical things as well as, you know, other things that so that communities can feel connected. Um, Next slide is, and our final goal, which kind of implements and infiltrates all of our goals, is evaluate equity, racial, and social justice. Our main policy, the rationale behind this is that um, we want to assess racial equity and social justice impacts across all Montgomery County parks and Montgomery County planning initiatives. So we want to really look at how our past processes have been, whether they've been equitable or not, and we want to figure out a way to move forward. And the best way to do that is to kind of assess where we are and figure out where we need to, in order to figure out where we need to go. So we want to employ strategies that assess racial equity and social justice impacts of master plans, functional plans, regulatory work, to inform and improve what we do as a planning organization. And so that's kind of the last policy. Again, it's about assessing the overall equity and racial and social justice throughout the county and using that information to inform where and how we implement programs. So I've gone through all of the goals. So we have 5 goals. I just put up 10, but 5 goals. And I would like to take a minute to pause for questions. And we really want this conversation to be a conversation. We want it to be informal and just really talk with community members to find out, you know, here's what we've been doing for the last couple of months with our heads buried in the sand, trying to get this work out to you all. And we want to know, did we get it right? You know, will all these policies and goals really help us achieve connectedness in the county? And is this something we should put forward in our general plan? And so if there are any questions, we'll start here and then we'll go back through the PowerPoint to kind of discuss each goal. So
Thank you, Kendra and Suzanne, for that presentation. I just wanted to quickly remind people about how to participate. So you can either write a question in the chat or a comment, and I see that we've already gotten a couple, so we'll address these in a moment. And then also, if you want to speak, if you'd like to say your question verbally, you can raise your hand. So you go to the participants little icon at the bottom of your screen, and at the bottom of that window, once you click on it, there's an option to raise your hand, so we can call on you as well, and you'll then need to unmute yourself. So to kick it off, we have a question from Denise Guitarra. She asks, as part of Goal 5, could you connect and include racial justice with environmental justice and climate justice and tie these into Chapter 6 of Healthy and Sustainable Environment?
I think the answer to that is yes. I think one of the things as we were preparing for this conversation we talked about was that some of the things may not be represented in the Connectedness chapter, but we cover them in other chapters. And these chapters and conversations are meant to work together as a way to kind of showcase the overall general plan and explain the plan. So with respect to Goal 5, I think it's really important to think through environmental justice and connections to healthy communities. That is a big thing for us when we're evaluating and assessing that policy. Are you recommending that we be more specific with that language in terms of the policy, like actually talk about, you know, assessing environmental constraints or environmental issues that pertain to inequity or racial or social justice?
She says yes.
Okay, so that's a good note, and I think there are folks here who are on the working group who are taking notes on what we, you know, should add. So thank you for that comment, and I think that's a very valuable insight.
I'll just add also, thank you for that. Some of the proposed actions under this policy include creating like mapping tools that help us locate and identify areas of greatest inequities in the county. And so we would be able to use those tools to look at a variety of different conditions, such as access, equitable access to natural spaces, not just parks and recreation spaces, but natural spaces, issues of tree canopy, which has air quality implications. I know Steve Finley is on this call as well. And those are just a couple of examples, but ways to look at heat island impacts that can be tied to climate justice. Are there areas where people are experiencing a disproportionate amount of like heat emergencies given the way the built environment is, and how does that overlap with certain demographics in the county and so on. So those are certainly the intentions of some of those policies, but I think we should definitely talk about it more specifically.
And I would say, I was thinking of asking Steve to chime in on this, but you know what? I don't want to steal his thunder from his conversation that's coming up. So unless he wants to kind of jump in on how the environmental group is looking at this, we can go on to the next question. But Steve, if you want to chime in, I didn't want them to get too much of a sneak peek before the next community conversation.
Steve wrote in the chat.
Was going back and forth with the mute, unmute. I'll just jump in briefly. I'm here in part to hear the comments on this section because there is connectedness between all of the chapters, and we do have recommendations in our section about environmental justice, but I did type in the window, I think we'd all be happy to strengthen the connections between the connectedness chapter and the environmental justice recommendations in our chapter. And we would love to get people's comments or ideas about things that they might like to see about that as well. We will be presenting our community chat next Tuesday night, and are planning also to do that in both English and Spanish. So you're also welcome to join in on that and reinforce your recommendation that we should make draw better connections between these chapters. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Do we have any more questions, Mari?
Yeah, so we had a question from Sylvia. You guys had mentioned that, the use of new technologies to connect and engage with each other. And she mentions that she recently took part in a Zoom discussion with another group. And she's curious, do you mean Zoom? How do you see these new technologies playing into the conversation and engagement and connectedness?
Well, I think we've all been in this period of trial and error a little bit, trying to see which platforms work the best for engaging with people. And I think also it's forcing us to really think through how do you engage people virtually? How do you get feedback, especially if people don't have adequate access, especially if people don't have the proper technology or materials to actually get online. Those are all major issues for this particular trying to kind of use emerging technologies. And the thing is the speed of the development of things, right? So we have to be willing to test and see how things work, but we also kind of have to lean on the things that we know work and we know are efficient. So for us, we've been doing a lot of online surveys. I know when Thrive first started and we were trying to get folks involved, we did a lot of community quizzes to kind of assess what people thought might be the needs of the county. So those are the initial things. Zoom is a great platform. We're using that today. We've also been using Microsoft Teams, and just trying to figure out which space works the best. So again, it's trial and error. If you have any recommendations for programs that we haven't heard of, I just used a program the other day called Miro, and it actually allows for people to type and do post-it and sticky notes on screen while everyone's involved in the conversation. That's a little bit more technically advanced, so it might not be for all of our platforms because we have to make sure that everyone can use them in an effective and efficient way. So it's an ongoing process, right? That's kind of what I have to say about it. But if anyone else has a comment on that.
I know for the Parks Department, I mean, I think storytelling is I think we're trying to think about ways to use audio and video. One of the staff members on this call, Molly and Jackson, is producing a video segment and I'll let her speak to it in more detail if she wants to, but just trying to, think about ways that we can better connect with people to help understand their stories and their experiences, and then communicate that to a wider audience, and certainly use that to help inform the work that we do. And I know that for myself as a GIS analyst, that we are trying to think of new ways to use story maps and sort of multimedia visual tools to help better tell stories and hopefully capture the stories that we're trying to communicate.
Thank you, guys. We had another question from Oma come in, and Oma asks about our emphasis on English learning. And you guys had mentioned a lot of technologies, and I'm curious, could you touch on how we're doing outreach, or how you see connection, engagement, and language and the intersection of those, especially for people who English may not be their first language?
So again, I don't have to answer all of these questions. There are people on the line who may have more information than I have, but I'm happy to be here and speak for the collective. But I think that relates to the connecting people to government portion of our goals. And specifically with the removing barriers to community engagement. We realize that because our county is so diverse, we have so many people that speak different languages. It can be a barrier for most people, which is why we were as an equity group, we were adamant about having this particular conversation in multiple languages. So there's a translator on the line who's helping to assist with that. But we have lots of work to do with that, right? And I think that work is going to be informed a lot by the community. And what as a native English speaker, I'm privileged in the sense that I can come to these meetings and be informed and participate very frequently. But as someone who's not a native English speaker, that may be a challenge. And I would love to hear from them and hear from anyone else in that particular situation of how we can be better, right? What are some strategies we could employ? I think one of the big pushes is to make sure everything gets translated. Anything that we write, have text for, gets translated. These community meetings is the first step towards making sure things are translated, making sure we hire more staff that can speak different languages and that are representative of the different diverse groups in our county. I think that's really, really important. That means you have to encourage your kids to become planners, guys, so that they can come and work with us and help to inform what we do in the future. But if anyone else wants to speak to that, I think it'd be great. Anyone? No one? Okay.
So, and I think this is a great opportunity to remind everyone that, like, you know, I think oftentimes these Zoom meetings are set up like webinars, and they're kind of seen as experts talking to other folks. But what we really would love is we recognize that in a lot of these things, we aren't the experts and we don't know all of the answers. So we're really looking to find collaborative solutions with people who are participating. So if you have ideas, you don't just have to ask a question. You can tell us an idea, tell us something that you're concerned about, and you're welcome to write it in the chat, but you're also welcome again to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you, and then you can say it verbally. We did have another question. This is from Jane Lyons, and she had a reference. She's referencing policy 2.2.1 for those who are following along. And it really dovetails with that, like who's in the room, how do we include people, and who do we maybe unintentionally leave people out? She says, what happens when community leaders aren't representative of the community? Sometimes the loudest and most involved voices are also the most privileged. And how are we considering this in Thrive and in our goals, policies, and actions?
That's a really great point. And that happens a lot because, again, there's that privilege there. I think for us, this is where kind of the evaluation of equity, racial, and social justice comes into play as well, to kind of assess where communities do or do not have the capacity to engage in the way that we're engaging, and how do we figure out how to meet them where they are, right? I know in my experience with community engagement, it has required us to have meetings in order to meet people where they are, both from a language perspective, cultural perspective, community perspective. We have to have meetings at different times, like noon might not be a good time for, you know, a person with children who has to work to either get them down for a nap or feed them, but maybe first thing in the morning at the crack of dawn is a good time. And so we need people to, I think part of the evaluation process for equity and racial and social justice will be us trying to do surveys, conduct assessments of which communities have historically had more capacity to participate and which ones have had less capacity to participate, and figure out how to mitigate that. Also, yeah, I think I can't say what is going to be done. I think there are ideas that exist, like I know DC does the ANC representatives that are elected, right? So they should therefore represent the voice of the community, but that is a smaller community, more insulary, so that you do get some of those voices that aren't typically heard. But again, it's about evaluating and assessing, at least from my standpoint, of where we are and which communities we need to put more resources or more time and effort into breaking down those barriers and fostering that trust. And maybe it's the unlikely partnerships, right? Maybe it's not the community group or the HOA association. Maybe it's a smaller group that is not as involved in certain other processes, but has a really great following in the community. You know, that's why we're coming to the community, is to find out, you know, who are the people? Like, can you tell us if that person is just the loudmouth that just happened to get voted, or if this person is like, this is the person you should really talk to because they're in touch with what's really going on and they're, you know, a resource. And a lot of times, if you're a person that's really active in your community, you might not be in that leadership role because you're so active, you're doing so much, right? So anyone else want to chime in on that? I'm happy to let anyone else talk, or whoever asked that question can respond to me too.
I think she did respond a follow-up, but I'll just add, like Kendra is saying, like, we fully recognize that we need to get to know our communities better in the work that we do. And I think for those of us on staff that have been through sector planning and master planning processes, we know that there are people who have the time and the ability to organize themselves and make appointments and come to the planning department and make a lot of phone calls and, you know, and be very engaged, but that those people are not always representative of all of the ideas and perspectives and needs and desires of the community. And so part of the intention of this goal is to really look critically in partnership with the communities, like really trying to better understand where all these different layers are of community influence. And that goes back to the idea of, you know, being better able to reach groups that speak other languages other than English, and tailoring our outreach and the way we attempt to connect with those things in mind. So
I think Molly raised her hand. I don't know if you want to
Great.
give some additional feedback, Molly.
Yeah, hey, hello everyone. My name is Malene Jackson, but most people call me Molly. So thank you. I think you guys have been doing a great job with fielding questions, Kendra and Suzanne. I'm also on the equity team, so I just kind of wanted to weigh in on the comments about reaching people where they are. And Kendra mentioned the community engagement video, which was happening, you know, at the early part. I think someone mentioned that we were doing a lot of community engagement and gathering feedback last summer and early fall, but didn't see any new approach to the policies and actions. And a lot of it has to do with COVID and us trying to be adaptable to the circumstances while people are literally fighting for their lives. We're also trying to reach out to people virtually as much as possible, given the state order. But we did one-on-one interviews, recorded interviews, and we're in the process of trying to figure out the best way to allow people to view those interviews so they can hear what the community is saying from them, and having one-on-one conversations. So I just wanted to say that I think there's also a policy geared towards continuing our community outreach efforts past master plans, past the point of the Thrive general plan, and for us to maintain relationships. And relationships don't happen overnight. We have to kind of continue to talk to people and have those, and we're very much aware, like Suzanne and Kendra were saying, that we need to work on that. So any of your suggestions are welcome.
Thank you, Molly. And yeah, Molly started to answer this question. Jane had a follow-up if you missed it in the chat. But she asked how the planning department can go out into the community and get feedback more, which she said started to happen with our outreach through Thrive last summer, but she didn't see this approach captured in the policies and actions. And I think this is a good time to also say with the Thrive document, what it really does for us as a planning department is it sets up our work program for the next several decades. Yeah, exactly. So one thing that we do is sometimes, even if we're not identifying specific changes that will be made because perhaps we haven't been able to look into them or fully develop a system or strategy, and that wouldn't be in the general plan as an implementation tool. But we do have things like one of the action items, I believe, is creating a community engagement toolkit and a plan, so that that we do really reflect on how we've been doing engagement as a department, and then what are some of the tools that we should be using and should be focusing on in the future and exploring. And Pamela Zorich has just dropped in one of the action items into the chat that you can see. It's develop a civic engagement toolkit to guide each master plan's civic engagement plan. So sometimes it's that we know that we need to do better, and we're going to develop the tools to do so. And I'm happy to turn that over to anyone else who has something to add on how we really capture these practices that we started using through Thrive in our policies and actions.
Thanks, Maren. Do we have anyone else who wants to comment or raise their hand, or yeah, I mean, this is the time.
Yeah, we do have some additional questions we prepared, which we can move on to, or, you know, continue to kind of keep it open.
One
Yeah,
thing you guys had brought up, and this is a question that I know your group had discussed, was about, you know, like you're talking about these pressing issues of connectedness and disconnectedness. And, you know, I just mentioned that this is a 30-year plan, but, you know, what can we do now to address some of these connectedness problems? Or these disconnected problems right now, as we're starting to implement and look into how to solve it on a more comprehensive countywide, you know, countywide level.
Sure. Well, I'll just jump in from the Parks Department perspective, and you know, as a planner that works in tandem with the Planning Department, I mean, we really believe that parks and public open spaces are platforms for social gathering and community gathering, and places where people can literally connect, and not just the parks, but the trails as well, and sort of the you know, the general public realm. But really these open spaces, these public open spaces, are very critical for placemaking, but also for like connectedness making. So, I mean, to the extent possible, we really encourage people to advocate for those types of spaces in their communities. Certainly, if your community is going through a master planning or sector planning process, to get involved with the analysis. I know the Silver Spring plan is just kicked off, to really engage with the analysis around that and advocate for those spaces. And we set out in this section of Thrive talking about the importance of these places being inclusive and welcoming, and just really vital places within our communities for connection to take place.
And I also think it is really important that these public spaces and parks and places where that are designed for us to socially connect with one another are safe and accessible for everyone, because there are people who have had different experiences in public spaces.
Right.
And they're based on our cultures, we all kind of use public space in slightly different ways, right? And so I think ensuring that those places are safe is a really big thing for us. But also we need to hear from you all about which spaces you like, you know, which spaces make the most sense, why do these spaces work, so that we can take note of that and parks and work with parks to ensure that those things happen. The public realm is important, not just park spaces, but civic spaces,
Right.
the sidewalks. You know, right now it's a kind of interesting thing going on where we're all trying to use the sidewalk, but they're typically about 4 feet. And that doesn't allow for 6 feet of distance without someone necessarily stepping in the street. So we want those things to be safe as well, and just really honing in on the importance and necessity of public spaces. I saw Khalid had his hand raised. I think that was Khalid, right? Did I see that right?
No, I saw that too.
No, Khalid? Okay.
So I know that, you know, you guys had, like, connectedness affects all different types of people in all different types of ways. And as we know, Montgomery County has a large aging population. Could you touch on how, touch on how seniors will specifically benefit from these connectedness policies and goals, you know, as people are aging, or those who are already feeling disconnected because of somewhat due to their age and how their lives have changed? Would you be able to talk about that?
Sure. I'll jump in, and then Kendra, I know you look like you had something to say. I mean, from a parks perspective, we have been thinking through, like, what are truly inclusive, like age-friendly parks and park design, senior-friendly spaces, trying to be more, intentional and mindful of the range of ages and abilities, physical abilities, of people using these spaces. I mean, I know that there are more places that seniors go to than just senior centers, but like one of the things we're talking about in the Connectedness chapter is sort of the decentralization of community, like neighborhood-based services. And so oftentimes it seems like, it's more cost-effective or economical for the county to co-locate a large number of services together. So there fewer of these centers spread out. And so one of the things we're trying to challenge and think about is that, if there's more of a decentralized approach where there's perhaps smaller or neighborhood level services that are easier to access and ideally accessible by walking distance if somebody can't drive, is no longer able to drive, or for example, that's a really big issue. And I'll kind of jump in.
Yeah, I was going to actually just speak to programs, and this is less from my experience as a planner, but more of my experience working for Parks and Rec and like coaching senior like athletic teams. I think programs are really important, and that's part of maybe the services that we provide, where seniors can connect to each other. I noticed that a lot of, even though maybe I was coaching a fitness class, for example, it's also an opportunity for the folks in the class to socialize and connect to one another and connect to people with similar interest. So providing more opportunities for seniors to come together for programming or shared interest groups and things like that. As Suzanne said, making our parks more accessible. It's also, really about, there's a lot of intergenerational living that's happening now these days where older seniors are maybe living with their family, and so maybe we connect them through some type of intergenerational programming and things of that nature. So I really think that goes down to connect people to services and making maybe some more robust services for our seniors in order to connect them socially.
That's great. And I think, we've probably been focusing on, we're all people, we've been focusing on connecting people to people and people to services. But Sylvia brings up about how we're connecting with other government agencies. And I think that this is a question both in the general plan, sometimes, how do we improve government agency coordination or communication. And then through this process, Sylvia asks if we've been communicating with the county executives working groups or that were set up by the county executive and Adriana Hochberg, who has actually come and spoken with planning staff, but they have a group that's focused on community engagement. Are we pulling these things in? And Steve, also, maybe if you want to jump in and speak to this too, because I know you've worked with Adriana, but not even just that group, just in general, how are we working with other agencies?
Sorry, I got a little distracted, but go ahead, Steve.
That's quite all right. Yeah, there are lots of ways that we are trying to reach out and work right now, especially with our government partners, to make sure that we're getting ideas from them, we're getting feedback from them. Like everything else, I think the ability to do that has been somewhat hampered by the COVID restrictions, and we need to keep working always on doing a better job of that. I'm going to quote my dad, actually, who said that communication is both the best thing that we do and the worst thing that we do, which really means that we constantly have to be working on it in order to make it work well for everybody. So we have had a good working relationship with Adriana Hushberg and our colleagues at DEP, particularly in the as we've worked in the environmental working group. But I still think that we need to do better even at that. And so we're looking for ways to try to broaden our outreach both to the community and to our government partners.
And I also think it comes down to us being able to be more empathetic, right? Like, how can I put myself in someone else's shoes? Can I put myself in, at least as a planner, we're always looking at it from a planning perspective, but maybe we aren't looking at it from the same perspective that the county executive might be looking at it. So, and even just down to like interpersonal relationships, just trying to understand, you know, where you might be privileged or where you might not be seeing something the way someone else is viewing it. Because I think that's important in connectedness and communication, is being able to sort of resonate with what the other side of the conversation is going through. And so for us to work more interconnectedly with other county agencies, I think we sometimes have to maybe take off our planner hat and put on their hat and see, you know, things through their lens, or glasses, for example, and see things through their lens. But that's something to me that seems like an important thing. Do we have any other questions? Or we have about,
Yeah.
are we
We have
going
about
till
3 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
So this has been an exciting conversation, and I hope that people can continue the conversation. I just wanted to point out a couple ways, and we can drop this in the chat so that you have it. But if you're interested in learning more about the Thrive Montgomery process, or staying kind of up to date with what's going on, you can visit thrivemontgomery.com and sign up for our e-newsletter, or just check out the documents that we have there. You can also, yes, you can see it on the screen. You can send comments to thrive2050@montgomeryplanning.org by email, and we will respond. We'll also share them with the staff who's working on the plan. You can also connect with us on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram accounts at Montgomery Plans or at Montgomery Planning. And we're going to have more of these chats on different topics, and we'll have them all throughout the month of June. Yes, it's like they know exactly what I'm going to say. So you can see some of the dates here. And again, I'll drop in the link in the chat so that you can sign up for other chats. And you can also give us a call, and I'll drop that phone number in there with any questions or comments, and a staff member will get back to you. But we really see this as an ongoing conversation. And then this September, our planning staff will be going back to the planning board and giving a presentation. So you'll also be able to submit feedback and comments and questions at that time as well. But you know, we appreciate learning from you all, and we appreciate you guys taking the time to come and chat with us. So I'll drop those links, and then we'll be saving this recording of the presentation on our website, and we'll also be sharing it with the staff who are working on the plan for the comments that we've had, and we will also share any chats that we received, any questions or comments with the staff as well. So thank you, and I'll leave it back to our two hosts to say the final words as I drop those links in.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a I guess kind of odd thing to try and have this, like, you know, casual communal conversation separately and from our homes over the computer. But we're so grateful that you joined today. You know, we can't do this work in a vacuum. We shouldn't do this work in a vacuum. It's really wonderful to hear your input, and please continue to get in touch with us with any ideas that you have. We really encourage you to take a look at the draft work product that went in front of the planning board last week and the ideas that are in there. So these are the contact information for Kendra and for myself. And yeah, we're just really happy that you joined us.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining, and making this feel less awkward than it probably is. And I think it's been a good conversation. I think the questions were really great. And again, at the next community conversations, if you all are attending, feel free to jump on the line and talk, because sometimes some of our hosts may or may not be as vocal as I am. I'm one of those, louder voices that I try to, make a rule for myself to step up and step back and make sure that I'm letting other people talk. So I want to make sure you all feel comfortable and everybody wants to contribute to the conversation, both through typing their questions and verbally conversing with us and sharing your thoughts and ideas. Again, like Suzanne said, we can't do this in a vacuum, and we want feedback. We want to know if we're getting it right. We want to know, what we might be missing. These are the things we want to find out. We're open to constructive, polite criticism. So please stay in touch with us. And yeah, so thank you all. And I don't know what the procedure is moving forward, Marin, now that's 1:02, but I guess maybe we just all hang up. I don't know.
Yeah, so thank you. You guys can head out of the meeting and we'll close it down. And like I said, the recording will be available. So feel free to drop off just at the little end button.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Be
you all.
well. Stay
Take
safe.
care.
Bye.